Hey guys, tonight we drift back beyond the oldest kingdoms before pharaohs, pyramids, or even planets, into a time when nothing had yet taken form. You float in the deep, dark cradle of existence, where two primeval forces, Apsu and Tiamat, slumber in an eternal embrace. There is no sky above, no earth below. Only the mingled waters of sweet and salt, fresh water and seawater, wrapped around each other like an endless lullaby sung by the cosmos to itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are suspended in a sea with no waves where time hasn't yet remembered to tick. The gods haven't been born, and yet you sense a low vibration like the hum of a forgotten song, something vast and unformed shifting in its sleep. Tiamat, the great saltwater mother, holds the potential of all chaos in her bones. She's not evil, not kind either, just monumental. She hums in frequencies mountains haven't yet learned to echo. Beside her, Apsu, her consort, the sweet waterfather, is calmer, more deliberate. If Tiamat is a storm holding its breath, Apsu is a quiet pond at twilight. Together they swirl and fuse in harmony, birthing the first divine generation, like little bubbles in boiling broth. Lahmu and Lahamu come first, twins, golden and strange names that sound like lullabies if you say them slowly enough. Then Anshar and Kishar, whose names mean whole sky and whole earth. They begin to sketch outlines of things to come above and below, up and down. These aren't the gods of thunder or love, yet just early sketches of concept. You float beside them as they stretch and yawn their way into being. They whisper and whimper and chase each other through the waters. Their energy crackles with adolescent mischief. Historians still argue whether this myth represents an early attempt at explaining natural forces or just a cosmic game of telephone over 2,000 years. The divine children keep multiplying. The god Ea, clever tricky, brilliant Ea, emerges from this tangled family tree. He'll become a major player soon, but for now he's just another spark in the endless deep. As these newborn gods splash and sing, their songs grow louder. They laugh in waves, clash in vibrations. Tiamat and Apsu begin to stir. The children's joy is disruptive. Have you ever tried sleeping next to a daycare? The waters ripple with their ruckus. It's all very adorable if you're not one of the two ancient entities trying to nap for eternity. And so Tiamat lets it slide for now. She watches the younger gods with a distant, dreamy eye, letting their noise ripple through her scales like background chatter. But Apsu, oh no, Apsu is starting to get those turn the car around vibes. The myth describes Apsu growing weary, not angry, not vindictive, just tired, overwhelmed, maybe even resentful. A feeling anyone who's ever babysat a room full of hyperchildren might understand. In the swirling silence of pre-time, Apsu floats to the edge of his patience. He confers with his advisor Mumu, not the most helpful guy, but he does carry a cool, misty aura and an enthusiasm for bad ideas. Apsu leans in and whispers to Mumu, "What if we just get rid of them?" Yep, dad of the millennium. Now, to be fair, this isn't murder as we know it. These are metaphysical entities in a fluid universe with no death yet, but still. You can feel the grim weight of this decision press like cold water against your chest. But news travels fast, even in pre-creation. The younger gods catch wind of Apsu's bedtime genocide plan and panic bubbles up. It's remember him, clever boy. With a flick of charm and a sharp mind, he devises a plan. You watch him mix incantations with silence, stardust with shadows. He sets a magical trap, and when Apsu approaches ready to unleash oblivion, Ea strikes, not with brute force, but with enchantment, a net of stillness, a lullaby of paralysis. Apsu sinks, quietly, without grandeur. It's said Ea built his palace over the subdued waters of Apsu's body, which, depending on how you look at it, is either deeply poetic or deeply uncomfortable. Quirky fact, the name Apsu later referred to underground freshwater aquifers in Mesopotamian belief. So yes, in a way, you're drinking ancient god every time you pour a glass of well water. But this isn't a happy ending, because you-know-who just found out what happened. Tiamat. She had been drifting quietly, her grief swelling like tides. She loved Apsu, or maybe she simply loved the balance they shared. Either way, something inside her, deep and tidal, has shifted. And you float quietly nearby, the tension curling like smoke. The cosmos has just seen its first betrayal, the first death, and somewhere far below, Tiamat opens one ancient eye. You're still suspended in the deep, dark ocean of before time where the currents no longer feel gentle. Something has changed. The water seems tense, coiled, like it's listening for footsteps even though there are no feet, no floor, and no footsteps, just God's thoughts and pressure. Tiamat doesn't scream, she doesn't roar or wail, not yet. Instead, she grows still, which is somehow worse. You sense her grief seeping through the waters like ink, heavy, ancient, and barely contained. Her companion of eternity, Apsu, is gone. His silence echoes louder than thunder, and even if the other gods try to act normal, busying themselves with celestial mischief, you know they feel it too. That ominous hush. That pause before the tide turns. The younger gods, those bright sparks of energy, start to notice Tiamat's brooding presence shifting. And for once, they hush their noisy games. You float beside them as they peek over their shoulders with a new emotion, dread. It begins subtly. Ripples that go the wrong direction, warm currents that turn cold without reason. One moment you're swimming through silence, the next you hear something that doesn't belong, a low pulse, deep and slow, Tiamat's breath. And then she begins to move, not fast, not violently, but deliberately, as if awakened from centuries of sleep with a very long list of grievances and nothing on her schedule except revenge. You drift with her massive form, her body the size of continents, her tail stirring the cosmic waters into whirlpools. She doesn't speak words, not the way you or I might, but you understand her. Not through language, through vibration, through gravity, through the tightening of everything. In her wake, creation itself begins to twist, and oh, does she create, not beauty, not stars, not hummingbirds or awkward teenage gods. No, she births monsters, real monsters, dragon serpents with smoke for breath, beasts with venom for blood, winged things with 1,000 eyes and claws that click like drumbeats. She gathers them one by one and infuses them with her chaos. Each creature is born not just of rage, but of purpose, soldiers in her looming war, and leading them king, ah yes, Kingu, a being sculpted in her grief, crowned by her vengeance, tall, dark, and terrifying, with a chest like a storm cloud and veins full of prophecy. She makes him her champion, her general, and well, her new husband. Yes, there's a bit of Oedipal awkwardness here, but it's mythology. Boundaries are not a top priority. Kingu receives the tablet of destinies. Imagine the divine equivalent of a presidential executive order pad, but inscribed with cosmic control. Whoever holds it writes fate, literally. Historians still debate whether it functioned like a magical contract, a symbolic power object, or some kind of divine iPad. With this tablet pressed to his chest, Kingu marches beside her. The monsters follow, the waters churn, and the younger gods, they absolutely freak out. Gone are the playful splashes and divine pranks. The atmosphere now is less sleepover, and more we are so unbelievably doomed. You find yourself floating among them as they gather, whispering in eddies and shadows, passing blame like hot potatoes. Some say Ea shouldn't have killed Apsu. Others insist Tiamat was always unstable. One especially nervous minor deity just keeps repeating, "We're all gonna die," while chewing on a reed like it's his emotional support snack. And this right here is the moment myth turns from family drama to full-on war epic. The gods hold a series of celestial meetings, complete with divine finger-pointing, overly dramatic gasps and the kind of passive-aggressive tension you'd find in an immortal group chat. Every proposal to stop Tiamat ends in someone nervously backing away. No one wants to fight her. Who would? She's chaos incarnate scales made of night, with a fleet of mythological nightmares and a new boyfriend who literally owns destiny. You drift near Ea. For all his cleverness, he's silent now, calculating, watching the waters twist around his ankles. He knows this isn't a problem you solve with a clever spell and a sheep offering. Something, or someone, stronger is needed, and in the shadows the name begins to rise. Marduk. It comes like a whisper first, then a murmur, then a chant, a name shaped like thunder held in the mouths of desperate immortals. You haven't met him yet, but oh, you will. The storm bearer, the chaos whisperer, the god who doesn't flinch when the oceans roar. But not yet. For now, you just feel the pull. The cosmos is bracing itself, and somewhere in the folds of the firmament, Marduk sharpens his breath. Quirky tidbit: in some versions of the myth, the monsters Tiamat births include scorpion men, fish-goat hybrids, and something described as a storm demon. It's like she let her subconscious design a video game boss menu. Meanwhile, you linger near the others, wrapped in a kind of pre-battle insomnia. The universe hasn't been built yet, and already it's unraveling. So you breathe, float, wait. The gods are cornered, the monsters are gathering, and deep beneath it all, Tiamat coils tighter. You're drifting through a cosmos that's stopped pretending everything's fine. The gods are holding emergency meetings in bubble-like palaces strung across the primordial waters. There's an unspoken rule: now don't say her name too loudly. Tiamat. It echoes, it draws attention. You know the kind. And yet the whisper spreads. Marduk, Marduk, Marduk. You haven't seen him yet, not properly. But even now, before he enters the scene, you can feel him circling on the edge of this chaotic ballet. He's younger than Ea, newer than Anu, but something about him radiates command, power, maybe a bit too much confidence if we're honest. But before we meet him, we need to rewind, because you can't understand Marduk until you understand what's just happened to Apsu. Now that still pool of divine silence. Ea, victorious but uneasy, has built his palace directly above Apsu's watery remains. It's a flex, also probably terrible feng shui. But gods are dramatic. In this strange underwater palace, a child is born to Ea and his consort Damkina. That child is Marduk, born not in peace but in the ripples of a cosmic murder. Even from his first breath, Marduk is different, not just divine, extra divine. like the kind of kid who shows up to daycare with a storm in his pocket and eyeballs that see both past and future. He's born with 4 eyes, no kidding. 2 for the obvious and 2 for everything else. His limbs shine like lightning. His breath stirs the oceans. When he speaks, the waves lean in to listen. And just like that, the gods have hope again. Marduk grows fast because divine puberty doesn't bother with acne and voice cracks. One day he's learning lullabies, the next he's crafting wind spirits in his spare time. You trail behind him as he walks through his father's halls, absorbing enchantments like a sponge, soak storms. Meanwhile, things on the Tiamat front are escalating. She's fully weaponized now, crowned, armored, surrounded by a council of shrieking demons and whispering advisors. Kingu sits at her right hand, holding the Tablet of Destinies like a cosmic backstage pass. Every time you glance their way, the water feels heavier, your skin prickles, the monsters snarl even when they smile. The gods try a few more meetings. You attend one hiding behind a cloud, made of divine condensation, obviously. The room is full of long beards, echoing sighs, and absolutely zero solutions. We could negotiate, suggests one. She's not negotiating. She's assembling a kaiju squad, says another. I say we hide in the marshes and pretend we're all fish. Eventually all divine fingers point to the same name. Marduk, he's called in. Not nervously, hopefully, like a star athlete being asked to play goalie, quarterback and snack coordinator all at once. And here's where things get interesting. Marduk doesn't leap into action. He sits, calm, regal, swirling a small wind in his palm like it's a cup of tea. I'll defeat Tiamat, he says, voice smooth as obsidian, but only if I become king of everything, bold. The room goes silent. You can hear the faint hiss of Tiamat's breath, even from here. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth reflects an early political allegory. Was Marduk's demand a metaphor for Babylon's rise to supremacy over other Mesopotamian cities? Or was it just standard divine ambition wrapped in stylish storytelling? Regardless, the gods agree. They don't have a choice. A contract is drawn up because even ancient gods love a good bureaucratic agreement. Marduk gets full sovereignty, supreme cosmic authority, all glory, no questions asked if he wins. You peek over a divine shoulder and catch a glimpse of the contract. It glows in golden ink, sealed with size, fate, and maybe a sheep's eyelash for flavor. Quirky fact: in Mesopotamian temple rituals, the actual tablets of such contracts were read aloud during festivals like Akitu, the Babylonian New Year celebration. Nothing says happy spring like reciting how a storm god violently overthrew his cosmic grandma. Now Marduk stands, taller than before, wrapped in silence, crackling with power. You float beside him as he steps away from the council. He doesn't speak again. He doesn't need to. The cosmos is watching, and Tiamat, still stirring in her storm nest, finally turns her gaze toward him. You hover now beside Marduk as he prepares, not with trembling hands or solemn hymns, but with the serene confidence of someone who knows the script and brought their own lighting. He doesn't rush. Gods with real power never do. Instead, he strolls through the raw, unfinished edges of the cosmos, collecting his tools like a chef prepping for divine mayhem. First, he gathers winds, north, south, east, west, plus 4 more no one talks about at parties. 8 winds in total, each like a sentient dragon-shaped leaf blower, snarling and loyal. He places them into his cloak like folding knives, each one coiled and humming. Next comes lightning, not the kind you see during summer storms, No, Marduk's lightning is the primordial kind, raw and thick, heavy as rope and sharp as shame. He braids it around his arm, a crackling ribbon that smells faintly of regret and fresh rain. Then the net. This isn't your average fisherman's net. Marduk weaves it from the size of ancient stars, from the hair of constellations not yet named. It glows and pulses like a living thing, stretching across dimensions. Some say he whispers to it while he works. Others claim the net hums back. And finally, because flair is important, he fashions a bow. A bow so large it spans the firmament, the arrow a spear of flame, longer than a mountain's shadow. You float close, watching as he nods once and slings the weapon over his shoulder like it weighs nothing. Even the gods watching from afar exhale, impressed but not reassured, because weapons are only part of the deal. Marduk also takes a tablet, a spell of command words etched in the language the universe barely understands yet. He slides it onto his chest where it glows faintly. His version of "I'm ready" and you tag along the silent witness to a god going to war. Across the oceanic battlefield, Tiamat waits. She's not pacing, she's not snarling. She's too ancient for theatrics. Her serpentine body stretches across miles of dark water, her face half submerged, crowned with horns that shimmer with salt and memory. Her monsters swirl behind her, a nightmare flotilla. Kingu stands at her flank, the tablet of destinies pulsing in time with his heartbeat. His eyes meet Marduk's across the churning void. You're not sure if it's fear or pride behind them. Maybe both. The moment stills. Some say the ocean pulled back just slightly. Others insist even the winds held their breath. And then Marduk speaks. His voice doesn't boom. It doesn't need to. It cuts clean and cold. It threads through the currents like a silver needle. Tiamat, I am not your enemy, but I am your end. Which, let's admit, is a pretty great line. She doesn't answer in words. Her roar is a wave so vast it tilts gravity. You feel yourself pulled backward as Tiamat rises immense, coiling skyward. Her mouth yawns open, and within it, whirlpools comets flame. Then it begins. Marduk unleashes his winds, all 8. They crash into Tiamat like hammer blasts of breath, twisting around her limbs, pinning her wings, flinging her monstrous children into chaos. The net flies from his hand and wraps around her belly, tightening like the jaws of time itself. She roars again, but Marduk is already moving, bow raised, arrow notched. You see it happen in a flash, the flaming arrow flying the storm, thickening the ocean, convulsing as it remembers the shape of violence. But Tiamat is not done. She breathes, and her breath is poison and flame. She bites at the net. Her tail strikes galaxies off course. Her eyes meet Marduk's, unblinking, eternal. They clash, not like mortals, not with clangs and bruises. Their battle rewrites the water. It distorts the sky. Your ears fill with thunder and your bones itch with pressure. You can't tell where Marduk ends and Tiamat begins. And yet, through the chaos, Marduk holds steady. He throws lightning. He commands the wind. He recites the hidden names of power. And Tiamat falters, not from pain, but surprise. She hadn't expected to lose. Then, in a moment of breathtaking clarity, Marduk draws his final spell. A whisper, one syllable, and suddenly Tiamat swells, gags, and freezes. The winds force her mouth open, and into it Marduk sends his storm. Not a metaphorical one, a literal twisting cyclone that floods her from within, tearing through her body like rebellion. She convulses, twists, her shriek becomes a silence that splits the heavens, and then she breaks,
Marduk's sword cleaves her from throat to tail. He splits her in two. And just like that, the world has material.
Tiamat's body hangs in the cosmos, vast and motionless, an ancient sea serpent queen torn asunder by her own creation. You drift silently in the aftermath as the waters settle and the winds retreat, tamed and panting like dogs after a thunderous chase. Marduk stands in the rippling silence, his blade still dripping with the starlight of her insides. No cheers, no triumphant music, just stillness, and that odd giddy disbelief that sometimes follows an impossible victory, like when you find your lost keys inside the fridge. Then, the work begins. You float beside Marduk as he approaches the two halves of Tiamat's broken form. Her spine stretches into the darkness like a ridgeline of ancient hills. Her scales shimmer faintly, even in death, as though reluctant to let go of their divine authority. He takes the upper half and lifts it gently, folding it across the void. It becomes the sky, seriously. He stretches her carcass wide, her inner walls becoming the firmament. Historians still argue whether this cosmic dissection was meant to symbolize order, triumphing over chaos, or just a glorified excuse for celestial landscaping. Either way, you look up and realize you're inside a god now. The heavens are Tiamat's skin, the lower half that becomes the earth. The mountains are her ribs, her tail curls into valleys, her breath lingers in the wind. Rivers begin to drip from her eyes. It's grim, yes, but also kind of poetic. Death repurposed as creation. Quirky fact, in one version her tears fill the Tigris and Euphrates. Imagine crying so hard you accidentally invent Mesopotamian agriculture. You follow Marduk as he surveys his work like a divine interior decorator. With her eyes he fashions celestial beacons, stars, constellations, little blinking reminders that chaos has been rearranged into bedtime stories. Her breasts become great mountains, her spittle births clouds. You try not to think too hard about the fact that weather forecasts are made of goddess drool. He plants the sky like a ceiling, a curved dome over the new firmament. Then he anchors it with invisible cords hung from Tiamat's great horns, now lodged at either end of the cosmos like enormous curtain rods. Below he gathers the swirling leftover waters, the ones not steeped in blood or revenge, and tucks them around the newly forming earth. These become the sea, the lakes, the underground reservoirs. He speaks their names softly, assigning them purpose. And yes, he installs a drain, literally. He cuts a hole in the heavens to let the rains fall. That's where precipitation comes from. You're welcome. But Marduk isn't done playing cosmic jigsaw. Remember those monsters, the weird chimeras and shrieking beasts Tiamat created in her wrath? Well, some of them are still around, moping, limbs half-finished, wings molting existential dread.
Instead of destroying them, Marduk puts them to work. He chains some to the underworld watchdogs and tormentors. Others he uses to guard secret knowledge treasure hoards, forbidden temples. It's either a punishment or a promotion, depending on how you feel about guarding golden goblets for eternity. But Kingu poor, confused, freshly divorced Kingu, he gets no such grace. Dragged before Marduk by divine bailiffs, Kingu still clutches the tablet of destinies, though his grip is trembling now. The gods vote. They're mad, maybe scared, maybe just hangry. Either way, they declare Kingu guilty, not just of treason, but of having the gall to wear power he didn't earn. Marduk strips the tablet from his chest, and for a moment you think Kingu might vanish entirely. But no, he's sentenced to a fate even stranger, disassembly. From his blood, rich with chaos, yet touched by the divine Marduk, will create something new. But that's a tale for later.
Right now, you're hovering in a half-built universe stitched together from the bones of a broken titan, stitched by a god who wears the storm like a robe. And the gods, they cheer. At long last they emerge from hiding, blowing conch shells, throwing glitter, or the Mesopotamian equivalent, tossing flowers into the cosmic sea. They declare Marduk their king, no hesitation now, he's earned it. The slayer of chaos, the whisperer of wind, the builder of worlds. Someone even carves a little statue in his honor, though the resemblance is generous. Marduk nods once. No speech, just a look. And somehow you know this universe has structure now, not peace necessarily, but shape. Structure matters, even if it's built from bones. You linger now beside the victorious storm god, and already the universe feels different. There's gravity to things literally and figuratively, where once there was only fluidity and whispering chaos, there are now borders, textures, directions.
Up is now a place, down is somewhere you can fall. Time stirs. Not much, but enough to notice. Marduk doesn't rest, not yet. The big battle may be over, but creation is a fussy beast. There's scheduling to do patterns to pin down 1,000 details that can't be left to cosmic improvisation. You ever tried organizing your kitchen drawer? Multiply that by infinity. So Marduk begins. You trail him through the skies, where he charts paths for celestial bodies. First he takes Tiamat's scattered bones, the ones that didn't make it into the mountains or clouds, and he crushes them into bright, burning fragments. Stars. He scatters them like seeds across the heavens. Some he fastens in clusters, others he lets drift. You watch him assign names to the wandering lights, some poetic, some suspiciously arbitrary. Then he installs the sun. A blazing orb with a strict schedule. It rises, it sets, repeat forever. The moon follows, quieter, more reflective.
He gives it cycles, phases, moods. The first time it shrinks and disappears, the other gods panic, thinking Marduk lost it. He doesn't laugh, but you suspect he wanted to. You see him plot the constellations, drawing invisible lines between stars like a divine connect the dots. These will help mortals one day tell time sail ships and invent horoscopes. Historians still argue whether the Mesopotamians used the zodiac more for farming or fortune-telling, but either way, thanks Marduk. Now he turns to time itself. This part's tricky. There's no wristwatch yet, no desk calendar to flip, just endless flow, so he slices it. He names the days, 7 of them. It's unclear why 7. Some say it's because of the lunar phases, others think he just liked odd numbers. Each day gets its own flavor, rhythm, and deity preference. Then come the months. He assigns these to moon cycles, 28-ish days each, though the math never quite lines up. You feel him frown a little when he realizes this. He's divine, not a mathematician. Quirky fact. The Babylonians were some of the first to use a lunisolar calendar, correcting for irregularities with an occasional extra month. Imagine having to explain leap months to a sleepy goat herder. Marduk continues. He sets the seasons, hot, dry, rainy, cold, the basics. You watch him tie each season to a direction and an element. Everything he insists must have rhythm, a pulse. Otherwise, what's the point? And with the turning of time, something strange begins to settle across the cosmos. A mood. It's not peace, not yet, but it's tempo. The stars blink in time, The moon breathes in crescents. The sun marches across the firmament like a soldier on shift. You feel it even in your bones, though you don't technically have bones. Not here, not yet. The gods start to relax. Some pick up hobbies. Others write ballads about Marduk's victory, though they conveniently forget to mention that most of them were hiding behind cosmic furniture during the fight. You glide through their celebratory gatherings, flute music made of air and light feasts where nectar floats mid-space. Someone starts selling miniature clay statues of Marduk riding a dragon, even though he doesn't ride dragons yet. And then just when you think he might take a break, Marduk begins again, because a calendar means nothing without beings to care about it. The earth lies beneath you, still raw and damp from divine surgery. The mountains stand, the rivers snake, the stars shine, but there's no one watching. Marduk pauses. He glances toward Ea, his father, and murmurs something soft. A request, a plan. Because now that time exists, now that days unfold in order someone needs to live them, and that someone won't be made from stone or fire. They'll need to think, to stumble, to cry, cook, invent math, break hearts, water plants, be glorious, be terrible, be human, but not yet. That part comes soon. For now you float above a universe finally ticking. Time exists now. It clicks softly in the background like the world's first grandfather clock ticking in the distance of space. You drift just above the forming earth where the rivers gleam like polished silver threads. Mountains cast long shadows, and wind begins to remember how to sigh. But something is missing. You feel it in your chest or wherever you would have a chest. The world is arranged but not inhabited. It's like a beautiful stage with no actors. The lights are on the curtains drawn, but no one steps forward. Marduk knows. He turns his gaze downward and begins a new chapter in this cosmic craft project. Because now, after defeating chaos and assembling time like IKEA furniture, it's time for the real mess. Humans. But before clay can rise, there's a problem to solve. You remember Kingu, don't you? Tiamat's loyal general/husband-bearer of the Tablet of Destinies, former cosmic intern of the month. Well, he's still sitting there, chained, watching it all unfold. Marduk's not the vengeful type. Not really, but he is practical, and Kingu, poor thing, is just brimming with raw, unrefined, divine material, chaos-flavored blood, the good stuff. So the gods gather again, and this time there's no squabbling. They vote unanimously. Kingu's blood will be used. You might want to look away. Aid takes the lead, of course. He always does when things get squeamish. With a flick of his hand and a murmur of syllables that taste like iron and salt, the deed is done. Kingu is unmade. His essence, what once made him a god, is drained and mixed with sacred clay. Earth stuff and chaos stuff. This, the gods say, is the recipe. You hover nearby as the first human is molded, not by accident, not by divine lightning bolt, by design. The fingers of gods shape limbs, curve backs, pinch ears that have never heard anything before. The clay is soft, sticky, imperfect, exactly what Marduk wants, because perfection doesn't grow, it just stands still. And Marduk is building something that can change. When they breathe life into the form, it shudders, then blinks, then inhales. Congratulations, you're the first audience to the first breath. The human opens its eyes and looks upward, not in fear, not in awe, but in curiosity. It's kind of adorable. This Marduk proclaims will be the worker of the gods, the keeper of time, the reader of stars and tiller of soil, the celebrator of festivals and the stumbler through moral confusion. You might think that sounds a little like divine outsourcing, and you wouldn't be wrong. Some fringe scholars even joke that humanity was invented so the gods didn't have to clean up after themselves. Historians still argue whether humans were created out of reverence, necessity, or sheer laziness. But there's more to it than that. Marduk wants meaning. He could have left the world to float all silent rivers and aimless clouds. But what's a masterpiece with no one to interpret it? What's time if no one forgets to set their alarm? So the humans are made. More than one, of course. They're shaped in batches, each one a little different. Some tall, some nimble, some immediately confused about why the sun is yelling at their skin. You watch as they scatter across the land. Some wander to the edge of rivers. Others climb the new hills, poking at rocks with existential suspicion. One tries to eat a flower. Another invents skipping. And the gods, they watch. They smirk. They lean on clouds and whisper bets about which human will invent lying first. Marduk observes with a strange kind of stillness, not smug, not cold, just present. And when the humans look up at the sky, they sometimes feel something they don't yet have words for. It's not fear, it's not worship, it's a vague awareness that someone or something designed this theatre. Also that someone may be watching. Quirky fact: in Babylonian temple schools, trainee priests were taught that humans were born to relieve the gods of labor. There were literal checklists, divine delegation, Mesopotamian style. And you're hovering above this muddy miracle, watching a story step out of its own myth. The world breathes now, and you're finally not alone in it. Now that humans walk the earth, mud-formed, blood-bound, endlessly curious, Marduk turns his gaze to their survival. Because sure, humans are fun to watch, but they're also fragile, sunburn easily, complain when it rains, fall into rivers trying to high-five fish. Without guidance, they'd be extinct by next Thursday. So Marduk begins shaping the world for them. First come the winds. He arranges them not as threats, but as messengers. The breeze in the morning. That's the east wind reminding you to stretch. The hot gusts at midday. That's the south wind herding the sun along. He gives each wind a name, a rhythm, a tendency to knock over small pots when you least expect it. Then he teaches the rivers their lines, he sculpts their beds, tells them when to flood and where to twist. The Tigris and Euphrates are assigned lead roles in the human drama to come delivering fresh water, fertile soil, and eventually centuries of border disputes. The land becomes patchwork marshes, here fields there, rocky places for goats to judge you from high cliffs. Marduk doesn't micromanage, but he does nudge things into balance. You drift beside him as he digs the foundations for the first city temples. He doesn't build them, humans will do that later, but he leaves blueprints in their dreams. Ziggurats stepped and towering, stone altars beneath open skies, places where sky and soil meet and pretend to be old friends again. He assigns the stars new jobs, not just pretty decorations now, but signals, seasonal guides, warning systems, romantic miscalculations. He gives the Pleiades to farmers, Orion to hunters, Venus to poets and people in bad relationships. Quirky fact: the Babylonians were among the earliest astronomers. They tracked planetary movements with such precision that modern scholars still use their data to correct our own calculations, all without telescopes, just eyes, clay tablets, and patient insomnia. Back below, humans begin to build, clumsily, They stack stones. Some fall. They try mud brick. It collapses. Eventually, one of them discovers if you mix straw in the bricks, hold better. The others praise him like a wizard and promptly start an argument about who invented it first. You smile. Civilization. It turns out begins with shared credit and petty theft. Marduk watches them with a quiet kind of fondness. He sees them light their first fires, mark time with shadows, and draw crude pictures of goats with suspiciously judgmental eyebrows. But with life comes complexity. Humans aren't just obedient clay dolls. They question, they argue. One accuses another of stealing a fig, someone else invents sarcasm. And emotions begin to swirl: love, envy, fear, and the strange urge to name everything, including things that already had names. So Marduk steps in again, not with thunder, but with instruction. He gifts them the idea of law, not a complete legal code yet, just the concept that there can be order among mortals, echoing the structure of the stars. He whispers it into the minds of chosen scribes, those weirdos already obsessed with scratching marks into clay. And suddenly, humans begin writing. First lists of sheep, then lists of people who owe them sheep, then prayers, songs, taxes, contracts, myths. A few even start writing about Marduk himself, though some of the details are already wildly exaggerated. Apparently he was 12 cubits tall and had fire-breathing nostrils. Marduk does not correct this. Historians still debate whether these early myths were written by temple elites to reinforce Marduk's cult, or whether the stories filtered up from popular oral tradition. Probably both. Humans love a good divine origin tale, especially if it includes monsters and real estate, and you hover beside the first temple foundation being laid. It's not much mud, bricks, reed mats, a ceremonial jar someone tripped over, but it's happening. A civilization is stirring, not perfect, never perfect, but rhythmic, structured, alive, thanks to the storm god who took chaos by the tail, swung it in a circle and turned it into something worth waking up for. You're standing, or floating really, at the edge of a monumental pause. The sky above is no longer an endless swirl of formless shadow. It's Tiamat's stretched skin pinned in place with cosmic precision. The land below hums faintly, as if remembering the roar that gave it shape. And now you brace for the sound that breaks the silence of new creation, the first war cry. Because it's time for the clash. No metaphors now. Marduk is going to war. You rewind just a bit. We left our Chaos Slayer preparing for battle, but you didn't see the moment he stepped forward. The gods, crowded and panicked, had just finished their official, we're totally doomed meeting. No one offered to volunteer. No one dared suggest a second vote. Then, like someone stepping into a bad karaoke performance because it's gotten awkward, Marduk calmly said, "I'll do it. You remember this. You were there, kind of, but the offer had conditions." Marduk, already radiating the quiet confidence of someone who can bench press hurricanes, didn't just ask for permission to fight, he asked for control. If he won, he would be king of the gods.
Forever. Not just temporary acting manager, full power, cosmic CEO. The gods blinked and agreed. What choice did they have? Now you're here watching Marduk stand at the edge of the abyss, weapons in hand. The winds curl around him like loyal pets. The net of stars tightens in his fingers, and his bow, it glows with fire so bright it burns the very air. Tiamat waits, and she is not impressed. She doesn't snarl, doesn't hiss. That's not her style. She floats in the deep with a majesty that could freeze time. Her eyes are galaxies, her teeth meteor storms. Her army beasts, shaped from your worst dreams, shiver behind her, not out of fear, but in anticipation. At her side is Kingu, chest puffed, gripping the tablet of destinies like a toddler clutching a remote he definitely isn't qualified to use. The battlefield is liquid silence. The stars lean in to listen. Marduk speaks first, not a monologue, just a simple, bored-sounding challenge. Submit or be split.
It's not his best line, but it doesn't have to be. He's brought enough thunder to back it up. Tiamat answers the only way she knows, how she transforms. Her body uncoils and expands. 1 second, she's a sea serpent. The next, a living mountain range of teeth, claw, smoke, and sea. Her belly churns with storm. Her voice deepens to the groan of fault lines. And then it begins. Marduk unleashes the winds, all 8. They surge forward like unleashed wolves, twisting the sea into peaks, striking Tiamat across her flanks, catching her wings, choking her flight. She reels but counters. Her breath turns to poison. A dark green mist erupts from her throat, corroding sky itself. One of the lesser winds screams and disappears. The others howl but hold the line. Marduk dives through the fog. The net, his divine trap, snaps forward. It lands, tight, glowing, around her belly. It tightens with every movement she makes, a constriction woven from time and starlight. She panics. She thrashes. Her monsters scatter. And here comes the flaming arrow. Marduk draws it back a single eye, narrowing. You can see him whisper a spell, not long, not loud, just precise, the kind of whisper that tells the universe to rearrange itself. He fires. The arrow tears the air, not metaphorically. It actually slices the air like cloth, folding heat and direction around itself until it reaches her heart and pierces it. But she doesn't fall. Oh no, she lunges. The wound ignites her, turning her into a comet of screaming salt water and spite. She strikes Marduk full on, and the universe tilts. You feel it, like gravity took a misstep. They crash, they claw. It's not a sword fight, it's a concept fight. Chaos against order, movement against structure. Tiamat's fangs find Marduk's shoulder. Divine ichor spills across the waters. He counters with a shout that splits the sea. Mountains rise. Flee, then return. And finally, he pulls the net. With one mighty heave, Marduk drags the torn net tighter, anchoring her limbs, holding her jaws apart. And into that gap he sends a storm. Not a little breeze, a full, boiling galactic cyclone, straight down her throat. She howls. The winds whip inside her. Her body bloats. Then she ruptures, not with gore, with transformation. The roar that leaves her mouth isn't rage, it's release. She splits. Light floods the heavens. And just like that, the war ends. No fanfare, just silence. And floating pieces of what once was the world's first god. There's no music, no horns, no slow-motion victory lap, just silence. Tiamat's enormous form, once terrifying, once beautiful, now drifts in still water. Her coiled body, split from throat to tail, floats open like a scroll. Her eyes are closed, not from fear, but from finality. You hover close, not out of morbid curiosity, but reverence, because something immense just ended, and something else is about to begin. Marduk, still hovering mid-air, lowers his sword. His arms ache, not from fatigue, gods don't tire, but from the sheer weight of what he's done. He stares at her body. For a moment, the whole universe seems to hesitate. Then gently, he begins the next phase. He builds. With her ribs, he forms the vault of the sky. He curves them into a great dome arching over the emptiness like the ceiling of a celestial temple. He nails it into place not with actual nails, but with language, with command. He speaks and reality settles. With her tail he carves the horizon. With her spine he shapes the mountains. Her blood becomes the oceans. Her weeping eyes birth the rivers. One tears down through the highlands and becomes the Tigris. Another winds more slowly into the Euphrates. Both carry memory. Quirky fact, in Mesopotamian cosmology, these rivers weren't just water, they were arteries of divine order, flowing lines of purpose laid across an otherwise chaotic world. Basically, Marduk's irrigation plan was also his creation myth. Now he lifts her skull massive echoing curved like an amphitheatre and fits it into the underside of the sky. That becomes the firmament, a sort of cosmic lid to keep things from spilling. If you've ever stared at a night sky and felt like the stars were inside something, you're not alone. The Babylonians thought so too. He divides what's above from what's below, a clean split. He doesn't want any leftover chaos drifting up where the stars sleep. So he puts a limit between heaven and earth, a ceiling made of her ancient bones. Then he turns to the clouds. They're her breath, or maybe her size. It's hard to tell. But Marduk shapes them carefully, placing them in the upper reaches of the sky, letting them drift. Later mortals will point and name them sheep, cloud, fish cloud, that one looks like my Uncle Cloud. You float beside him as he does all this. It's not done with violence now. It's tender, almost surgical, like turning grief into sculpture. And he isn't working alone. The other gods begin to emerge from their hiding places. You see Ea approach first carefully, as if uncertain the danger is truly over. He doesn't speak at first, just nods toward his son with a proud half-smirk. Then comes Anu, then Enlil, then the rest. Even the lesser deities, those who once cowered behind the folds of existence, now emerge blinking, trying to understand the new shape of things. Together they help Marduk decorate. The stars aren't just stars now, they're markers. He arranges constellations, giving each a name and a role. The plough, the goatfish, the lion. Most of them will later show up in zodiac charts and horoscopes that ruin first dates. He teaches the moon its path, a soft crescent arc across the black, a reminder of rhythm, of cycle, wax, wane, vanish, return, and the sun, the sun. That blazing orb becomes more than heat, it becomes law. It rises each morning, not because it wants to, but because it must. Marduk orders it so. Historians still argue whether this order from chaos theme was a political metaphor. Babylonian kings would later model their entire regimes after this myth, casting themselves as new Marduks and their enemies as various Tiamats with very bad PR. Meanwhile, back on the newly minted earth, the waters begin to settle. The first winds, no longer weapons, become breezes. The clouds scatter. Light pierces the firmament. And Tiamat, she is everywhere now. She is the rivers and the mist, the salt in the sea, and the grit in your mouth when the wind changes direction. Her body, repurposed, continues. She's no longer the antagonist. She's the world. You realize it wasn't destruction, it was transformation. And Marduk, he doesn't gloat. He looks at the sky, at the stars, at the blood-soaked clay of what will become Earth. And he nods, not with pride, but with purpose. You drift over a newly formed Earth, its surface still warm with the breath of gods, its rivers whispering secrets in a language no one speaks yet. The winds have calmed, the skies glow, the war is over. But not all debts are paid. because one figure still lies in chains, Kingu. Yes, Kingu, remember him, Tiamat's consort, her chosen general, the one-handed, the sacred tablet of destinies, like a toddler given a throne. You might have forgotten him in all the thunder and chaos. Marduk hasn't. And now comes the reckoning. You find Kingu kneeling before the gods, not proud, but not entirely afraid either. There's something stubborn in him. Maybe he believed in Tiamat. Maybe he believed in himself. Maybe he just liked holding powerful things and looking important. Who among us hasn't? But he lost. The tablet is gone. Marduk reclaimed it with barely a glance. Now it floats against his chest like a shield of fate, and Kingu is just a prisoner with godblood and nowhere to go. The divine council assembles. They've had some snacks, a few celebratory dances, and now they're ready to vote. Should Kingu be spared? Exiled ground into glitter. The decision is unanimous. Kingu will be sacrificed, not as punishment, as utility. You hear Marduk's voice, calm and grim. From his blood we shall create mankind. The gods murmur, some surprised, some relieved, because this solves a few problems at once. They've built a world, but they don't want to manage it. Who has time to collect offerings, clean rivers, or remind humans to plant barley in the right season? Let the new beings do it. Let them be made from something divine but flawed, a creature that carries a spark of chaos, a drop of king's unruly blood, blended with the dependable weight of clay. You float beside Ea as he prepares the ritual. The god of wisdom is quiet now. He murmurs incantations that roll like water across the sand. He draws a circle. He collects sacred dust. Then with careful hands he pulls the essence from Kingu's body, not violently, but reverently. A glowing thread of life force, red and thick and humming with memories. It's said that the gods used clay from the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth where life begins and endings sleep. They knead the blood and mud together, and you watch again as shape emerges. Shoulders, fingers, knees, a heart, a mind, a soul, the first human. They breathe and blink and look up. They're imperfect. Of course, they forget things. Their limbs are weak. They cry when hungry. But there's something in their eyes, something that wasn't there before. Awareness. A hint of what it means to be cursed and blessed at once. You drift around them as they stand hesitant. The gods smile, some clap. Others nod clearly, already wondering when this one will invent taxes or backgammon. Marduk speaks, let them bear the burdens of the gods. And just like that, humans inherit responsibility. Offerings, prayers, rituals. All the exhausting parts of cosmic maintenance are now delegated to clay and blood creatures with poor judgment and occasional artistic talent. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth was theological satire or deeply sincere. Were the Babylonians saying we serve the gods to keep the world running, or the gods outsourced everything to us and then left for vacation? Either way, it worked. Temples would rise, priests would chant, kings would point to this myth and say, "See, I rule because Marduk said so, it's in the clay." And Kingu, what's left of him, flows through your veins now. His divine defiance, his love for a mother who lost, his belief that destiny was something you could hold. It didn't end with him. It became you. Quirky fact, in actual Babylonian rituals, the clay used for temple idols and human figurines was often taken from specific riverbanks considered sacred. The idea wasn't just symbolism, it was precision cosmology. Make it wrong and the gods might ignore you. Now you drift again. The gods begin their descent. Their roles are shifting. Marduk remains above, distant but watching. And you, little clay-blooded wonder, you're just getting started. You hover now above a world that has shape, a sky that has weight, and a people that have purpose, even if they don't always know what it is. But Marduk, he knows. And so even after the chaos has been split and the clay has been shaped, he keeps working, because the world isn't finished until it's organized. And Marduk is nothing if not thorough. So today you follow him on a different kind of journey, not one of violence or gods or dragons, but one of architecture. He is building the heavens. No, not rebuilding. Not furnishing. Building. From the bones of Tiamat and the logic of the stars, Marduk lifts the world upward and outward, assigning duties, roles, and coordinates like a cosmic HR manager with excellent taste. First, the firmament. He stitches constellations into it like embroidery. Each star placed exactly, not just for twinkle, but for instruction, a warning, a memory, a map. And then the sun and moon, already born, already glowing, are given strict duties. No more free floating. The sun is told when to rise, when to fall, how to move in a way that keeps mortals vaguely on schedule. The moon gets a chart of phases, changes face regularly, and is basically told to control tides without asking too many questions. Quirky fact: Babylonian astronomers were absurdly good at tracking lunar eclipses. They could predict them centuries in advance without telescopes. All they had were tablets, keen eyes, and the deep suspicion that something was always up there watching. You float beside Marduk as he draws time itself into a grid, days, weeks, months. He doesn't name them yet, that's a job for poets and priests, but he numbers them, marks them, and pins them to star positions. The gods love it. Suddenly meetings happen on time, but something's missing. The heavens feel too quiet. So Marduk returns to the other gods and gives them their positions. Each deity is assigned a station, not based on favoritism, though Ishtar definitely flirts her way into a nice orbit, but based on nature need and a pinch of whimsy. Nabu, god of scribes, is stationed near Mercury, quick, clever, darting between bigger players. Shamash, the sun god, anchors the daily cycle. Ninurta, the warrior, gets a more complicated position, constantly arguing with nearby stars and occasionally tripping over Saturn. These divine placements become the architecture of worship. People below, confused and barefoot, begin associating planets with personalities, and personalities with power. A god for love, a god for justice, a god for livestock. Seriously. Historians still argue whether the Babylonian pantheon emerged before their astrology or whether the sky gave birth to the gods as much as the myths did. Like most old things, the answer is probably both. Back on Earth, the humans begin noticing things. The sun comes back repeatedly. Someone draws a mark in the dirt and realizes this happens every 24 rotations of your awkward clay feet. Time is being measured. One man counts the days between 2 full moons. Another notices the stars rotate in a pattern. A shepherd names a constellation after a sheep. His friend names another after a fish. Eventually, someone tries to name one after a banana and is gently asked to sit out. Up above, Marduk watches. He's not controlling anymore, not exactly. He's orchestrating, setting rules, then seeing if your little mud-born scribbler can follow them. Spoiler, you can. Not always gracefully, but enough. Marduk then crafts the pole star, the cosmic fixed point, the one star that doesn't drift. It becomes the anchor of all things, the quiet reminder that even when everything else moves, something must stay. He calls it Ilusa, the star of the god. Later, it will become Polaris, and even later, a thing people argue about in forums. With the heavens finished, Marduk rests a moment, a very brief moment. Then he begins assigning roles to time. Daylight is for labor, night is for reflection, rest and low-stakes campfire drama. The first morning it's crisp and curious, the first night heavy with the scent of dust and moonlight. You drift beside a human lying on his back, staring upward, mouth open, not in fear, in awe, because for the first time the sky makes sense. Not total sense, mind you. This guy still thinks rain is sky tears and the goats control lightning, but the basics are landing. And so the heavens shine, not just above but within. The structure Marduk builds in the stars becomes the dream pattern for all that follows temples, calendars, song stories. Even your heartbeat follows his rhythm now. The sky ticks now, you float beneath it, half asleep, half hypnotized, as the world's first calendar drips into motion. Time, that slippery eel, has been tamed, at least a little. And Marduk is watching. He doesn't meddle, not anymore. But you can feel his presence woven into the quiet between sunrises, crouched beneath the full moon, tucked inside the pause before a storm breaks. He's not gone, just finished with the loud parts, because now the show is running. Each morning the sun clambers over the mountains like it's been doing it forever, even though you both know it learned the route yesterday. The moon floats up shyly at dusk as if embarrassed by its own predictability. The stars. They've fallen into their cues like dancers on a silent stage. But something new is unfolding. The humans have begun keeping track. Someone, likely bored or neurotic, starts carving notches into a stone every time the moon disappears. Another starts stacking pebbles to count the days between floods. It starts small, like all big things, 1 mark, 2, 28, and then it hits them. This happens again. That's the moment time becomes real, not when it begins, but when it's noticed. You watch as entire villages start predicting things: when to plant, when to fish, when to hide from that weird goat star that always seems to ruin things. Marduk didn't just give humans a world, he gave them a clock. He also gave them choice. Because here's the messy truth: when time starts moving, so does blame. A crop fails must have planted it on the wrong moon. Someone dies young. Maybe the gods are punishing the village, so rituals form, not to control the gods, no one's that naive, but to appease them, to say, hey, we saw the signs, we followed the rules, please don't turn our goats inside out. You hover over a dusty courtyard where a priest draws a sun symbol into the dirt with a stick. Around him people murmur, some bring bread, others offer song. One man, clearly confused, offers a dead beetle and is gently asked to return next week. Time isn't just measured now, it's feared, because once you know what should happen, you also know when it doesn't. That's how prophecy is born. Someone notices a solar eclipse, daylight swallowed whole. Another hears thunder in winter. A child dreams of red stars falling from the sky. And suddenly calendars aren't just what is, but what might be. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian astrology was born out of science or superstition. Truth is, it was both. A delicate mix of math and meaning, star maps and anxiety. Quirky fact: the Enuma Anu Enlil, an enormous series of Babylonian omen tablets catalogued over 7,000 celestial observations tied to earthly events, basically a cosmic spreadsheet of doom. If Venus rises and the wind blows from the west, The king will stub his toe, that sort of thing. And now you see it. The temples rise, not in every village, but in enough, built in stages, mud brick, then stone, then walls, inscribed with star charts and dates of festivals. You float through one as priests perform the Akitu ritual, a New Year celebration honoring Marduk himself. It's loud, ceremonial. Someone in a goat mask yells things. Someone else pretends to slap the king gently. Symbolic rebuke, not actual HR incident. It's all very theatrical, but underneath the incense and chants, there's sincerity. People believe. Not in a cartoon version of Marduk with flaming eyeballs and sword poses. They believe in the pattern, the order, the rhythm of things, and more than that, they believe they're part of it. You drift above a scribe in a quiet corner, clay tablet in lap stylus in hand. He's writing the date, carefully, reverently. He doesn't know this tablet will be dug up 4,000 years later by an archaeologist wearing too much sunscreen, but you do. And the date he writes, year 5 of the reign of King Hammurabi. 3rd month under the star of Jupiter. It's not just a date, it's a coordinate, a belief that time has meaning, that history is something you can pin to the heavens and revisit. And Marduk, he watches, not always kindly, not always loudly, but somewhere in the pause between seconds, he waits, because time isn't just motion, it's memory, and you little clay and blood being are starting to remember. You drift now over a world that hums. It's not music exactly, more like the background buzz of existence doing what it does. Rivers flowing, animals grunting, humans arguing about fish prices. The land has settled, the skies are dependable, time clicks forward, and Marduk from his high perch in the heavens decides it's time to decorate the earth. Not with wallpaper or fancy vases, with function, because a universe without rhythm is chaos, but a universe without features, that's just boring. So Marduk gets to work again. He starts with the terrain. You follow as he traces ridges into the dirt, with his finger crafting mountain ranges out of hardened dreams. Valleys follow soft impressions where rivers will rest and cities will grow. The desert's vast, dry, humming with heat and whispers. They're not punishments, they're contrasts, backdrops against which life becomes more precious. Then he sprinkles forests. He doesn't invent every tree. Delegation is a skill, even for gods, but he lays out the ecosystems. You watch as one seed becomes 10, becomes 100, becomes a jungle, so loud with frogs and wind, you can barely hear yourself think. The animals, ah yes, they arrive like a parade. Lions that blink like kings, sheep that forget how legs work when startled. Oxen, dogs, snakes, fish, birds with opinions. Each creature has a niche, a purpose. Some for farming, some for food, some for pure comedic relief, like the lizard that thinks it's scary but runs like a panic-stricken sock puppet. Quirky fact. In early Mesopotamian tablets, animals were often categorized not by species, but by utility, edible, sacrificable, and makes annoying sounds at night, were totally valid labels. Marduk watches it all unfold with the quiet pride of a craftsman seeing his workshop finally furnished. But something's missing. The land has topography, the air has creatures and humans. Well, they're learning not to drink salt water, which is progress. But there's no connection yet. So Marduk does something strange. He starts digging. Not a trench, a plan. He draws out the layout of cities. Not literal streets yet. Humans will decide where to put the taverns and sewage, but the idea of concentrated meaning. of sacred places. He plots ziggurats in his mind, massive stepped pyramids where heaven and earth can shake hands. Each city will be anchored by a god. Each god will represent a principle, and each principle will be written into the bones of architecture. You float beside him as he envisions Eridu, perhaps the first city where Marduk's own father will dwell, a place where freshwater springs bubble up beside shrines, where priest-kings sit beside reed-lined canals and wonder what it all means. Then Nippur, city of Enlil, where power stirs the wind and law coils like smoke. Later, Babylon will rise, but not yet. For now, Marduk's blueprint is ethereal, a whisper on clay, a divine draft. He carves lines in the dust canals, roadways, temple paths. These won't just guide oxen and carts. They'll guide meaning, because every part of the land must speak.
Even the mud, especially the mud. You watch as mortals begin copying what they see in dreams, ziggurats like staircases to the gods' courtyards that echo with prayers, and goat sounds workshops where potters unknowingly mimic divine creation with every spin of their wheel. Historians still debate whether cities like Eridu were designed with cosmological symmetry in mind, or if the mythology came later to justify the plumbing. Either way, someone was thinking big. You float into a half-built city where the bricks are still damp. A priest kneels beside a carved stone, humming a melody older than alphabets. Around him, masons lift stones, shepherds barter for grain. A child tries to pet a goat that clearly isn't interested. It's messy, but it's alive. Marduk smiles. Not because it's perfect, but because it's becoming. And beneath your feet, well, the idea of feet, something stirs. The earth remembers because it was made from something old.
Tiamat's bones, yes, but also her memory. Her chaos doesn't vanish, it sleeps. In deep caves, in strange corners, in the quiet dread that lives between thunderclaps. Marduk knows this. He didn't destroy chaos, he repurposed it. And now he watches to see if you, little human, can build something beautiful on a battlefield made of bone. You're drifting now over freshly carved land where clay meets ambition, where humans armed with little more than curiosity and questionable sandals are starting to make their mark. Cities rise, smoke curls from cookfires, and goats continue their quiet campaign of petty defiance. But beneath the noise of daily survival, something stranger is stirring. Worship. You see it first in gestures, hands lifted to the sky, faces turned to stars, offerings left on flat stones in the quiet hours before dawn. No instruction manual, no YouTube tutorial, just instinct, a whisper in human bones that says someone is watching, and they're not wrong, because Marduk is still here, still watching. He stands at the edge of the firmament, not as a thunder-wielding overlord, but as a patient architect, curious to see if his blueprints can breathe. He doesn't ask for shrines, doesn't demand chants or incense. But humans, oh, they love a good chant, so they start making up songs, not elegant ones. At first, it's mostly "Thank you, big storm guy," and "Please don't unmake my goats," but the melodies catch. People hum them while planting grain, while digging wells, while trying not to be eaten by things with too many teeth. You float beside a scribe with ink-stained fingers, squinting by lamplight as he scratches into clay Marduk, who split the sea mother, who placed the stars, who shaped time. It's one of the first written prayers. Soon others follow, their compiled, shared, polished. Eventually they become the Enuma Elish, the great Babylonian creation epic, not just a story, but a spell, a song of power meant to be read aloud at New Year festivals, while the people of Babylon reenact the beginning of time with robes, music, and slightly too enthusiastic shouting. Quirky fact: during the Akitu festival, the high priest would recite the Enuma Elish in full. That's over 1,000 lines of cuneiform, basically, the ancient version of binge-watching a sacred Netflix series with no pause button. You peek over the priest's shoulder one festival morning. The courtyard is packed. People lean forward. Children blink in confusion. A man selling roasted dates keeps muttering, "Here comes the part with the dragon." And when Marduk's name is spoken, when the priest reaches that part of the story where the storm god cuts the sea in half, the crowd shivers. Not in fear, in memory, because this isn't just performance, it's reenactment, a confirmation of cosmic order. You begin to see how clever Marduk's plan was. He didn't just build a world, he built participation. His myth becomes the framework for government timekeeping, even urban planning. The king doesn't just rule, he channels Marduk. The temple isn't just sacred, it's a model of the cosmos. Each level of the ziggurat echoes the heavens above. You hover beside the top of one such ziggurat, perhaps in Babylon, though it might also be Borsippa, and see an astronomer with wild hair and ink on his nose, measuring star positions with a stick. He hums to himself, whispering calculations. Then he sighs and says, "That comet is definitely up to something." Historians still argue whether temple astronomy was purely spiritual or deeply scientific, but Babylonian star records were so precise they could be used to retroactively map planetary movements across millennia. That's right, ancient scribes were basically the NASA of mud-brick civilization. And Marduk, he lets them take the credit. He doesn't thunder down with correction or decree. His presence is subtle now, not in the voice of kings, but in the rhythm of drums during temple processions, in the way priests sweep courtyards in circles imitating the path of the stars, in the way the people begin to believe that if they stop telling the story, everything might fall apart. Because that's what humans do when handed a myth. They turn it into a responsibility. Even the farmers who barely remember the names of the gods still follow the star signs to know when to dig, plant, harvest. They don't know Marduk by name, but they look to the heavens every morning and nod as if someone up there deserves credit for the sunrise. And maybe they're right. You drift lower now down to the temple courtyards where clay tablets dry in the sun. One bears a simple line, "Man is made to serve the gods." Another tablet, written by a less serious scribe, says, "May Marduk bless this bread. Also, please smite my neighbor's chickens," because reverence comes in many forms, and all of them are part of the story. The sun rolls lazily across the sky, and you hover just beneath it, feeling the rhythm of this new world take deeper root. Humanity is no longer crawling. It's building, dreaming, gossiping, and more importantly, telling stories. You glide through a village at twilight. A fire crackles. Children sit in a lopsided circle, while an elder leans in, voice low and eyes shining. She tells them the story of how the heavens were once the skin of a dragon, how the wind was tamed by a storm god, and how Marduk tied the stars to their proper posts so the sky wouldn't fall. She doesn't read from a tablet. She just knows, because the tale lives now in the body passed down like breath. And the people, they listen. Not like passive audiences, but like heirs. This isn't just myth, it's family history, with extra teeth and flaming arrows, sure, but it explains why things are the way they are, why the flood comes, why the stars shift, why every new year the priest climbs the ziggurat and chants to the wind. You drift through the air as the elder's voice lingers like incense. She ends the story with a flourish. And that is how the sky was stitched, child. Never forget it holds your name. Then she leans back, satisfied. Someone offers her a fig. A small boy tries to sneak a beetle into the fire. Life continues, but elsewhere things are taking a more official turn. You arrive in the great city of Babylon. It rises from the dust like a dream made of bricks and rules. Temples, homes, irrigation channels that slither like artificial rivers. And in the center, a towering ziggurat layered like a wedding cake, built by architects with excellent taste in symmetry. And inside they are writing the Enuma Elish again. Not just orally now, but in cuneiform, etched into thick clay tablets that weigh more than some children. Lines upon lines of divine narrative. Marduk slaying Tiamat, Kingu's blood, and the birth of humanity. The assignment of stars, the gifting of time. It's bureaucratic poetry. Quirky fact, the Enuma Elish was often stored in temple libraries, shelved carefully with catalogue numbers, just like a mythic version of the Dewey Decimal System. Ancient librarians were not to be trifled with. You peek over the shoulder of one such scribe, his meticulous tongue between teeth, stylus tapping as he counts syllables. He's not just copying, he's enshrining. Every stroke confirms the order of the cosmos. Every tablet preserves the truth that without Marduk's victory, there would be no dawn. But it's not just for reading. The story becomes ritual. Every Akitu festival, the tablets are removed from the temple and the high priest reads them aloud for days. Think sacred binge reading, but with incense drums and occasional livestock. During the festival, even the king humbles himself. He steps into the temple, removes his crown, and is struck lightly by the priest. Symbolic rebuke, but still. Then he's asked, have you ruled justly this year? If he lies, legend says the gods will know. If he tells the truth, Marduk is pleased. This ritual is part theatre, part theology, and part annual performance review with divine stakes. Historians still debate whether this was more political spectacle or genuine devotion. Was it to keep kings accountable, or just to keep the people invested in cosmic order? Most likely both. Because in Babylon, religion and government were twins born from the same myth. And Marduk is at the center of it all, not screaming from the heavens, not zapping towns with lightning bolts, but present in every chant, every offering, every sunrise that arrives exactly on time. He is no longer just a god, he is the blueprint. You float now in a market street as someone trades barley for a carved amulet bearing Marduk's emblem. A woman whispers a prayer over a pot of stew. A child draws the tablet of destinies in the dirt, unaware it also looks like a beetle. The myth has sunk into the marrow of things, into law, into architecture, into lullabies, because once a god becomes a story, they never die, they just wait to be retold. You float now above the silent halls of a temple where firelight flickers on carved brick, and the air smells of incense, baked earth, and something older, something like memory. Below, a priest murmurs through cracked lips as he presses a stylus into wet clay. He's writing the story again, the Enuma Elish. You've seen it told by fireside and whispered in festivals, but here now it becomes stone, permanent, heavy, a myth that dares to defy time. The priest squints at his tablet, mouthing the words as he writes, when above the heavens had not been named, and the story unfolds once more. This is how myths survive not just in memory, but in mud. The clay tablets are thick, rectangular, sometimes broken. They're stacked in libraries alongside tax records, star maps, even personal letters like "Tell Mother, I have not been eaten by wolves," actual letter, probably written by someone who absolutely had been. And yet the Enuma Elish is placed higher than all the rest, protected, sacred. Why? Because it's not just a tale of gods and monsters, it's a manual. You glide into a scriptorium where another scribe recites aloud as he writes. His voice is low, almost reverent. Each name he speaks, Tiamat, Apsu, Marduk, vibrates slightly in the air around you. These aren't just characters, these are blueprints for reality. The myth isn't retold to entertain, it's retold to anchor the world. Every tablet is a safeguard, every line is a reassertion of cosmic order. To write the Enuma Elish is to say, yes, the universe still holds. Yes, the sky is still above. Yes, chaos was beaten once, and if needed, again. Quirky fact, the version of the Enuma Elish that survived into modernity was found in Ashurbanipal's library in Nineveh, written in Akkadian on 7 clay tablets. The 7th is badly damaged because of course it is. Even ancient myths suffer from bad endings. You drift now over a temple courtyard where the story is performed live. Actors don masks. One wears the twisted face of Kingu, another a stylized serpent representing Tiamat. Someone very dramatically bursts through a curtain with lightning painted on their chest. Marduk in full divine swagger. The audience cheers even though they've heard this story before, especially because they've heard this story before. That's the secret. The Enuma Elish is not meant to be new. It's meant to be reliable, predictable, like sunrise or taxes or that guy who always shows up late with figs and excuses. Because the story isn't just about what was, it's about what is right now. Every time the myth is told, it reaffirms that the cosmos is still in place, that time still flows, that the gods still watch, that Marduk high above still keeps Tiamat's bones arranged just so. You drift into the mind of a listener, a boy in the crowd, maybe 12, who holds his breath as the priest reaches the part where Marduk splits the sea dragon. His eyes go wide, his fists clench. He will remember this forever, not because of the fire or the music, but because deep down he's terrified that if the story isn't told, the world might slip back into sea, into chaos. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant primarily for religious recitation or political legitimacy. Some say it was crafted to reinforce Babylon's rise and origin myth, where their city's patron god becomes the supreme deity. And they're not wrong. In this version of reality, Marduk doesn't just defeat chaos, he earns the right to rule. He earns it through strength, yes, but also through design vision order. He turns chaos into mountains. He makes calendars out of dragon bones. He wins, not because he's the strongest, he wins because he makes meaning. You look down now on a dusty shelf, half buried in sand and time. A broken tablet rests there. Its lines are faded, its edges cracked, but the words still whisper, "He made mankind to bear the burden of the gods." And somehow that sentence still matters, because you are one of them. You listener, stumbler, late-night thinker. You were made of blood and earth, not to grovel but to carry the divine pattern forward, to remember the myth, to repeat it, to live like the sky still holds because it's been told that it must. The air shimmers as you drift into Babylon, not the Babylon of myth, but the living one. Streets coil like sun-baked serpents lined with bricks that carry the fingerprint of every hand that pressed them into place. Vendors shout about figs. Someone plays a reed flute badly. A goat ignores the law of gravity for no clear reason, and above it all, like a mountain made by mathematicians, rises the Atemenanki, the great ziggurat, Marduk's house, his ladder between heaven and earth. You glide up its steps, 7 levels stacked like the cosmos itself, each narrower, steeper, humming with prayer and pigeon feathers. At the top, priests sweep dust with golden brooms, careful not to offend the architecture. This city belongs to Marduk, not just spiritually, officially. He is Babylon's patron god, its protector, its cosmic champion, and let's be honest, its best PR. You watch as the king emerges from his palace, garbed in lion-embroidered robes. He doesn't just rule because he wears a crown, he rules because Marduk chose him. That's the story, and no one dares rewrite it. In every corner of Babylon, Marduk's name is spoken. His myths aren't just bedtime stories, they're civic infrastructure. Courts of law begin with invocations to him. Treaties are sealed with oaths on his name. Even debts, yes, including sheep-related IOUs, often mention Marduk as a witness. Quirky fact, in some contracts, if a debtor failed to repay a loan, the punishment might involve being handed to Marduk. Scholars still debate what that actually entailed. It could mean temple servitude, or just a very stern talking to by a priest. The myth of the Chaos War lives in these bricks, literally. In ceremonial reliefs, Marduk is carved mid-battle, bow raised, winds spiraling around him, Tiamat writhing beneath. To visitors from other cities, this says, "Our god slayed the sea dragon." Yours didn't. Welcome to Babylon. You pause in a busy marketplace where storytellers chant the Enuma Elish to children. But it's not just for them. Everyone listens, because it's also a reminder that Marduk brought order, that chaos was defeated, that the universe itself owes Babylon a thank you fruit basket. Historians note this was part of Babylon's rise to imperial power. By making their god supreme, they legitimize their political dominance. Smart move. If your city's deity created the world, then conquering your neighbors is just cosmic housekeeping. You float into a schoolroom, a scriptorium where young scribes practice cuneiform on little clay tablets. One student is scribbling his name repeatedly, a classic, while another scrawls a passage from the Enuma Elish and mutters, "Marduk formed mankind to serve the gods." Then pausing, he adds in the margin, "except on festival days." Even the bored children know the story, because here, knowing the myth is part of being civilized. It's part of being Babylonian, and you, hovering just above the rooftops, can see how deeply Marduk is woven into every facet of this place. He's in the calendar the year begins with his ritual. He's in the justice system, his name invoked in trials. He's in the architecture temples that mimic his heavenly order. Even the city's name, Babylon, from Babili Gate of the Gods, positions it as the cosmic hinge between realms. Every morning smoke rises from temple altars. Every evening stars blink over the Euphrates like distant approval. And all the while Marduk remains silent, not absent, just still, like a great engine that no longer needs tuning. You drift above a garden where 2 scribes sit cross-legged, sharing a bowl of dates and arguing about theology. One insists Marduk is the highest god, the other, probably from a rival city, murmurs about Enlil. They go back and forth for hours because even mythological supremacy is regional. Still Babylon wins. It always does. Why? Because stories win. And Babylon told the best one. They took chaos and carved it into narrative. They gave their god a dragon to slay a world to build and a people to carry his name. You glance up at the ziggurat one more time. Not just a building, a metaphor, a staircase from mud to stars, a reminder that humans born of blood and clay can rise, if they climb. Night falls softly over Babylon, and with it the stars come spilling out like a careless god dropped a basket of diamonds across the sky. You drift higher away from the city's lanterns and ziggurats into that velvet vastness where the other gods still whisper. Because Marduk may have claimed the top floor of the divine apartment building, but the pantheon is crowded, and oh, what a crowd! You float past the murmurs of Anu, the sky god, an original big boss. He doesn't visit often anymore, semi-retired perhaps. You might say he passed the metaphorical scepter the moment Marduk turned Tiamat into creative real estate. Below him lingers Enlil, the wind god, stormy, unpredictable, always shouting. He once held top rank before Marduk came along with his charm, his thunder, and his suspiciously marketable myth. Enlil still gets love, though. He's like the old rock band that headlines local festivals. The name means something. Then there's Ea, Marduk's father, lord of freshwater and wisdom. Still clever, still winking behind the scenes. Without Ea, none of this would have happened. He's the one who took out Apsu. Remember, Marduk might have got the crown, but Dad planted the seeds. And Ishtar, oh yes, Ishtar. You can't miss her, goddess of love, war, and dramatic plot twists. One minute she's blessing crops, the next she's turning lovers into wolves. She once stormed the gates of the underworld just to yell at her sister. Iconic. Quirky fact, Ishtar was worshipped with rituals that included music, dance, and, controversially, temple prostitution. Scholars still debate how literal those accounts were, but no one disputes her influence. When she walks, the earth blinks. You spin now through a divine constellation of lesser-known deities, Nergal, god of plague and underworld vacations, Nabu, patron of scribes and awkward elbow ink stains, Shamash, the just and glowing sun god who sees everything and absolutely won't let you forget it. Each has a domain, a temple, a cult following. Mesopotamian religion wasn't monotheism, it was a committee, a celestial city council complete with arguments, alliances, and divine side-eyes. Marduk sits above them now, but not always comfortably, because power, even in myth, is complicated. You drift through a temple archive filled with tablets, some praising Marduk, others invoking older gods. In Uruk, Ishtar still reigns supreme. In Nippur, Enlil's priests scowl at the Babylonian upstart. In Eridu, Ea is remembered as the cool dad who kept chaos in check before the drama started. Historians still argue whether Marduk's rise was theological evolution or political branding. Some believe the Enuma Elish was state propaganda designed to elevate Babylon above rival cities. Others see it as a natural shift, a storm god who rose just when people needed storms with structure. You land now in a little village outside the main cities where farmers worship quietly. There's no ziggurat, just a flat stone and a handful of fruit. The names spoken here are older, Ninurta Ashnan Dumazid, but even here in this humble place someone hums a tune that mentions Marduk, because even if he doesn't live in their temple, he lives in their calendar, their flood cycles, their stories, and stories travel. As Babylon's influence spreads, so does Marduk's myth. Traders carry it up the rivers across mountains through markets where someone's always arguing about copper prices. Scribes transcribe it in distant dialects. Rulers adopt it to justify their crowns. You pass a caravan where a priest chants the Enuma Elish to a group of travelers beside a fire. One leans in, one rolls his eyes, one falls asleep halfway through the part with the flaming arrow. And that's the secret to Marduk's endurance. He isn't just a god, he's a story seed planted in soil far from where it was written. Quirky fact. Even after Babylon fell, elements of Marduk's myth lived on. Traces appear in later cultures' creation stories from Assyria to Persia, and even echoes in early Jewish texts. The dragon-slaying theme, that's everywhere. Tiamat may have died, but dragons never go out of style, and as you drift once more above the earth, you see them all, the gods of water, wind, fertility, stars, some still honored, some forgotten, some merged, renamed, rebranded over centuries, but Marduk he remains, because Babylon may crumble, but stories travel. You float now not in Babylon, but far, far away beyond its walls, beyond its markets, beyond even its proud ziggurat spine, reaching toward the stars. The cities have grown quiet behind you. The myths, though loud and thunderous in their prime, now whisper beneath sand and silt, because time, dear listener, keeps marching. And what survives it, Clay? You're drifting over the baked deserts of what is now Iraq, but once, long ago, was a cradle of scribes and stars. Beneath your invisible feet, the earth holds its breath. For centuries, these lands were layered in ruin, dust, and forgetfulness, whole libraries buried, temples swallowed, names once shouted in prayers reduced to mute syllables, until someone dug, not a god, a man. He knelt in the dust, brushed it gently, and found a tablet, not gold, not gleaming, just clay, cracked, inscribed, ancient, and on it the story. Marduk, Tiamat, the winds, the war, the blood. You peer over the archaeologist's shoulder as he squints beneath a dusty hat. His hands tremble not from fear, but awe. Because this isn't just an artifact, it's a voice that hadn't spoken in 2,500 years, and suddenly the myth awakens again. Quirky fact, the first major fragments of the Enuma Elish were discovered in the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh in the mid-19th century by Austin Henry Layard and Hormuzd Rassam. Imagine stumbling across the Mesopotamian book of Genesis while digging a trench with a shovel and a guess. You drift through the museum halls now, London, Berlin, Baghdad. The tablets, once hidden under bricks and bones, are displayed behind glass. Scholars hunch over them, translating the cuneiform, line by line, fragment by fragment. One section is missing, another is smudged, but slowly, painstakingly, the story reassembles. Tiamat rises, Marduk accepts the challenge, the stars are pinned to the sky, and for the first time in millennia, people read those words again. They don't know the rituals, they don't chant the invocations, but their eyes widen, their hearts stir, because even if they don't fully understand it, they feel it. A myth that shaped a city that shaped a civilization, and a god who once cut chaos in two and stitched a calendar from its skin. You hover in a quiet study room where a professor reads aloud to their students. He created the world from her body and made humans from the blood of rebellion. And one student, curious modern, maybe a little skeptical, leans forward and says, "Wait, this sounds kind of familiar," because it is. Across cultures, echoes of the Marduk myth reappear. In Genesis, God speaks light into existence, separates waters above and below. In Canaanite myth, Baal slays Yam, the sea god. In Greek lore, Zeus overthrows the Titans, carving Olympus from chaos. Historians still argue whether these are borrowed narratives or universal archetypes. Did the Babylonians influence everyone else, or did everyone just happen to imagine the world as a divine drama, but you, dear dreamer, know the truth? Stories ripple, not like waves, like constellations drifting, tilting past from tongue to tongue, carried on parchment, etched into rock, forgotten and found again. You slip now into the mind of a poet in 700 BCE. He's rewriting an older version of the creation myth, substituting names, updating metaphors, replacing wind gods with thunder gods. But the bones still there. Tiamat still rises, Marduk still answers, order still wins. Even today the myth is alive, in stories of heroes who face monsters not with strength alone, but with cleverness, courage, a touch of chaos. In the child who draws dragons on notebook paper and doesn't know she's echoing a sea goddess. In you listening now, tracing the shape of the myth in your breath. Because once a story enters time, it waits. It waits to be uncovered, to be retold, to be believed again. The world you hover over is louder now. Not with the thunder of gods or the hiss of sea dragons, but with wheels on stone hammers, on copper voices rising in markets and courts. Empires swell. Empires collapse. Over and over, kings rise, carve their names into pillars and fall. The gods, though, they start to grow quiet. Marduk, once thundering in the mouths of kings and priests, begins to fade from the daily hum of prayer. Not erased, just softened, like a mountain under centuries of wind. You drift through a newer Babylon now. One with more traders than temple scribes, more foreign dialects than sacred chants. The old rituals continue, but fewer remember why. A priest recites the Enuma Elish during the Akitu festival, but his voice is hoarse. Some in the crowd check their sandals, others yawn. Change has arrived, and with it, new gods, new conquerors. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, each bringing their own stories, their own heavens. Marduk, he gets absorbed, reinterpreted, even rebranded. The Greeks equate him with Zeus, storm ruler, cosmic organizer. Others link him to Jupiter or even to Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of light and order. But each time he's translated, something slips, the vowels shift, the bow fades, the dragon becomes metaphor. He's still there, but behind the curtain now, not gone, just symbolic. You float into a scroll room in Seleucid-era Babylon. The temple walls are cracked. One scribe remains copying the old myths for a private collector who doesn't even speak Akkadian. The scribe doesn't weep. He hums while he writes because he knows, even as Marduk shrinks in public memory, he swells somewhere else inside stories. The myth changes clothes. It moves through languages. It drops some names, keeps others. But the pattern stays. Chaos rises. A hero answers. The world is rebuilt. Quirky fact, when early Jewish scholars compiled the Genesis creation story, they lived not far from Babylon and had likely encountered the Enuma Elish. While Genesis omits dragons, it opens similarly darkness water and the word that brings order. Coincidence? Debate continues. Even in Christian texts, the dragon returns. In Revelation, a seven-headed serpent rises from the sea, only to be cast down. Sound familiar? Scholars still argue, are these echoes of Tiamat, of Kingu, of chaos that refuses to stay dead? Maybe. Or maybe the story is just too true in its own mythic way to vanish. You pass a child in 4th century Mesopotamia playing near temple ruins. He doesn't know Marduk, but he draws a figure in the dirt, with a star-tipped spear. He calls it the Sky Hero, then gives it wings because something deep remembers, and then the final transformation begins. The gods become ideas, not beings in the sky, not idols in stone, but principles. Marduk becomes the voice of reason over chaos, the symbol of leadership, the divine mind that organizes, not worshipped in temples now, but whispered about in philosophy. You linger in a lecture hall in Alexandria centuries later. A teacher speaks of a logos, a cosmic ordering principle, a force that speaks and creates. He doesn't call it Marduk, but you feel the rhythm. He says before form there was the word. And just like that, the myth lives on, not in temples, but in thought, not in sacrifice, but in story, not as God, but as structure. And Marduk, he no longer demands offerings. He waits quietly, in the rhythm of a heartbeat, in the shape of a well-told tale, in every moment when chaos rises and something deep in you says, stand up, face it, shape it. You drift now through a landscape not drawn in clay or chant, but in brushstroke and spade. Modern archaeologists have arrived. The year is somewhere in the 1800s, and the deserts of Iraq whisper again. You follow a British explorer wearing too much linen and too little water, wiping his brow as he uncovers a buried city, Nineveh, the ancient Assyrian capital. Beneath layers of sand and ash, a library reawakens. Inside, clay tablets, hundreds, thousands, stacked, broken, baked, whispering. You move with careful fingers, ghost-like as they are lifted, brushed, wrapped in linen and carried across oceans. The tablets arrive in European museums where glass cases protect them like holy relics, because in a way they are. Among them, the Enuma Elish. You peer over a scholar's shoulder. He's hunched, spectacled, translating cuneiform under candlelight. The first syllables emerge like music played on a forgotten instrument, when above the heavens had not been named. The myth is reborn, not by priests, not by kings, by linguists and curators and curious minds with muddy boots and tired hands. Quirky fact. One of the first full translations of the Enuma Elish was published in the late 19th century, and it stunned the academic world, not just because of its age, but because it predated Genesis, offering a creation story older than the Bible, older than Homer, older than memory. You drift into a university lecture hall in the 1920s. A professor reads aloud, Marduk split the body of Tiamat like a shellfish. Students exchange glances. Some smirk, some marvel, because the image is strange but familiar, not just as myth, as structure, as a cosmic diagram that might explain more than it seems. A few rows back, a young student writes in her journal, "This sounds like the sea was once everything, and then came division, creation by separation." She doesn't know she's rediscovering an idea thousands of years old, but ideas like rivers carve their way back, and so do stories. Soon more tablets are found, more myths, other versions, some older, some weirder, some that contradict. One tablet describes Tiamat as weeping before the battle. Another says Kingu offered himself willingly. Historians still argue whether these versions reflect different cities' traditions or just scribes taking artistic liberties on deadline. But all agree the myth mattered, not because it was neat, because it was endlessly retellable. You drift now into the modern world, our world. Skyscrapers rise where ziggurats once stood. Smartwatches tick where sundials blinked. Most people have never heard of Marduk or Tiamat, but the pattern, oh, the pattern lives on. You hear it in fiction. The hero faces chaos, tames it, rebuilds. You see it in headlines. A new world order emerges from crisis. You hear it in bedtime stories. A dragon rises, a young hero rises higher. And in philosophy classrooms where someone asks what comes first, meaning or matter, even now the clay remembers. A fragment of a tablet is dug up beside a crumbled foundation in southern Iraq. A tourist passes it unaware. A goat nearly steps on it. But eventually someone notices the marks curved like waves etched with care. A fragment of a fragment, it says, and he placed the stars in their stations, and just like that the sky is pinned again. You hover now over one last museum exhibit glass casing, dim lighting a plaque that reads Creation Story, Babylonian c. 1100 BCE. A child presses their nose to the glass. They whisper, "Is this real?" And a parent smiles. It's a story, sweetheart. But it shaped the world. The child doesn't look away, because somewhere deep in their small heart the dragon stirs, the storm gathers, and the stars blink, ancient, watchful, waiting to be named again. The dust of history swirls beneath you now, soft and golden, in the evening light. You're no longer hovering over Babylon or Nineveh, or any place with a name carved into tablet or stone. You're drifting through the collective imagination, the space where myths breathe after their empires fall. Because something odd is happening. Tiamat is returning, not with armies of chaos, beasts, or venom in her mouth, but in theory, in books, in papers, in glowing digital screens where modern minds poke and prod ancient tales, like curious children digging up fossils in the backyard. Who was she really? A monster? A mother? A metaphor? You float into a university seminar room present day where a professor stands before a glowing slideshow. The slide reads Tiamat Chaos or Cosmos. The room shifts. Some students nod ready to take notes. Others raise skeptical eyebrows. One clearly just Googled, "What is a cosmogony?" The professor begins. Traditionally, Tiamat was cast as the villain of the Babylonian creation myth, the sea serpent, the embodiment of chaos. But what if she wasn't a villain at all? A hand shoots up. Wait, so Marduk's not the hero. A pause. Not necessarily, the professor says. He's the organizer, the order bringer, but Tiamat, she's what came first. The primordial ocean, the source of the gods, maybe even the source of life itself. The class murmurs. You drift through their thoughts, tasting them like incense. Some find it refreshing, others uncomfortable, because it means that the story isn't black and white, it's fluid, just like Tiamat. Historians still argue vigorously over whether Tiamat was meant to be a demon, a deity, or simply a narrative placeholder for what couldn't be explained. Some call her chaos incarnate. Others suggest she represents the divine feminine, a cosmic womb disrupted by younger gods playing at kingship. Quirky fact in modern neo-pagan and feminist spiritual movements, Tiamat has been reclaimed not as a monster, but as a symbol of wild creation, primal wisdom, untamed nature. The ocean that births and swallows not evil, just vast. You drift further into online forums and late-night podcasts where people with glasses and chamomile tea dissect the myth from every angle. One host says Marduk's victory wasn't just about killing a dragon, it was the moment structure defeated possibility. Freedom got turned into rules. Another adds, or maybe he didn't defeat her, maybe he became her, took her power and rechanneled it. The stories ripple. Now Tiamat is a planet in science fiction, a creature in video games, a goddess in poetry, an Easter egg in a TV show. Her name scrawled in comic books, carved in gamer lore, whispered in black metal lyrics. She returns. Always. even in a world that no longer believes in storm gods and wind nets, because we still believe in the sea, in the unknown, in the thing that comes before the structure. Tiamat lives there, and Marduk, he's still here too, in the charts, in the rituals of calendars and classroom bells, in bullet-point agendas and folder hierarchies, in the very way you organize your thoughts. He is your impulse to bring shape to mess, to file, to finalize. The myth survives not as belief, but as pattern. A pattern that plays out every time someone stands at the edge of disorder and says, let's fix this, let's give it a name, let's make a beginning. You float now in the space between waves, between the storm and the stillness. You can feel both forces there, not enemies, not even opposites, just counterweights in an eternal dance. Tiamat, the swell, Marduk, the form, and you little speck made of blood and clay are shaped by both. You are born of the tide and trained by the calendar. You contain the chaos and you build from it, just like the world. The myth has taken on a new skin, now stripped of incense and brick, echoed instead in glowing screens and symphonic trailers. You float through a modern city, lights blinking like artificial stars, and everywhere you look, fragments. Tiamat in a fantasy novel, Marduk referenced in a conspiracy thread, the phrase from Chaos Order etched on a motivational poster next to a badly photoshopped sunrise. It's subtle, but it's there. You slip into a library, modern, warm, a hum of air conditioning and fluorescent thought. A teenager skims a book on mythology for a school paper. She frowns, reading a sentence that says, "In Babylonian myth, the god Marduk defeated the sea goddess Tiamat and created the world from her remains." She pauses, whispers, "Huh, metal. Yes, yes it is, because the myth, like the sea it came from, keeps surging. Even if no one bows to Marduk anymore, the idea of him, the architect of cosmos, the bringer of form, still moves through our systems like invisible scaffolding. You drift into a coding boot camp where students write functions and loops. Structure out of chaos, one mutters, debugging a mess of logic gates. Somewhere, Marduk smiles. You slip into a government office where someone struggles to write a policy that makes sense.
We need a system, they say. Another nods, another sighs. Somewhere Tiamat stirs, because bureaucracy is a ritual too. Even now, Marduk shows up wherever humans try to organize the unruly, whether it's molecules, schedules, or toddlers hopped up on fruit snacks. But here's the twist: the myth never ends with order, not truly, because life doesn't. Every spreadsheet breaks, every system hits entropy, every neat calendar gets wrecked by a surprise storm, a missed alarm, or a toddler with a crayon and a vendetta. So we start again. We gather the pieces, and we retell the myth. Historians still debate whether Marduk's story is one of permanent victory or perpetual maintenance. Did he conquer chaos once and for all? Or is he in an endless cycle of tidying up the universe before it unravels again? If you've ever cleaned your kitchen at night only to find it wrecked by breakfast, you know the answer. You pause now above a playground where a child builds a tower of blocks.
Careful, focused, then with absolute joy knocks it over. Laughter. The other kids rush in. A new tower begins. That's the rhythm. Creation, destruction, creation again. Not a war, a pulse. Quirky fact: some scholars now suggest the Enuma Elish wasn't just a creation story, but a recreation story performed annually to reaffirm existence, reboot. The universe remind everyone that order was not a permanent gift, but a daily task, like sweeping, like praying, Like choosing kindness in traffic, you float past a woman lighting a candle at her kitchen sink. She's not thinking about Babylon or Marduk or chaos dragons, but in her own quiet way, she's marking the boundary between dark and light. She's enacting the myth. You pass a therapist's office where someone says, "My thoughts feel like a storm." The therapist smiles gently and says, "Let's make some space." And just like that, the wind is caught again. You hover above all of it, the stories, the systems, the scribbles on paper and screen. It's a mess, a beautiful humming, overwhelming mess, and yet somehow it holds. Because we keep telling it to. Because deep in our clay, the myth still pulses, a god, a dragon, a world from bones, and you strange creature of reason and sea carry both. You hover now at the edge of everything where history becomes dream and dream becomes something even older. The cities behind you blur into silhouettes. The names of kings fade like dried ink. Even the stars once nailed into the firmament by a thunder god's hand begin to shimmer less sharply. But the story still beats, faint, enduring. You drift into a bedroom, present day. Someone lies in bed phone on the nightstand, eyes closed, breath soft. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone like you, doesn't matter, because you're here for the story, and tonight that story has returned to its beginning. Remember, there was a time, before naming, before land, before meaning, just the deep, Tiamat, endless, elemental, not evil, but enormous, the sea that held all things, and from within her, disturbance, not malice, just movement, a trembling in the silence, young gods stirring like thought in a blank mind. And when they grew loud, she tried to hush them. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she simply wasn't ready to be changed, but change came anyway. And from the chaos, one god stepped forward, not oldest, not wisest, but willing. Marduk, with eyes of fire and wind in his palm, rose to confront her. And he won, or so we're told. Yet victory never comes without transformation. He took her body and didn't waste a thing. Sky, earth, rivers, clouds. He fashioned time, placed stars like reminders. And then he made you human of mud and blood, bearer of stories, collector of myths, not to rule, not to rest, but to continue the pattern, to organize what is formless, to speak what is unspeakable, to carry meaning into mess. And still, every year the sea rises, every week the wind forgets its direction, every hour something slips beyond your grasp, but then you remember and start again. Historians still argue whether Marduk's tale was meant to be taken literally or whether it was always a mirror, not of gods above, but of us, of our need to fight entropy, to carve sense from noise, to feel that even in a universe spinning wildly, something chose for there to be light. And maybe that someone was you. Every day you wake up and reassemble the world. You fold chaos into order through love, through labor, through laughter that refuses to give up. You name things, you bind winds, you pin stars. And though no one calls it a myth anymore, it is, still. Because myths don't die, they wait buried in clay, encoded in dreams, disguised in blueprints and bedtime stories, ready to be found again. So tonight, as you rest, as your breath slows, remember, you are not alone. You are a whisper from the beginning, a ripple from that first deep sea, born of storm and structure. And the story isn't over. It's just begun again. And now, as the final words settle, and the last echoes of thunder fade into the velvet dark, you find yourself drifting gently into stillness. The sea of chaos is calm now, a glassy expanse beneath the stars that blink softly overhead, patient, ancient, familiar. Your breath slows, your mind softens, you feel the weight of the day peel away like mist. Whatever winds you carried, whatever storms stirred behind your ribs, have been caught folded and gently placed aside. There's nothing left to shape tonight, no dragons to face, no names to recall, just this moment, just this rest. The bones of Tiamat no longer press upon your shoulders. The voice of Marduk no longer demands your strength. All that remains is the warm hum of myth, tucked safely inside you, quiet and deep, like a story asleep in the clay. Let it rest. Let you rest. In the safety of rhythm, in the kindness of silence, in the memory of stars, and as the final ripple fades from your thoughts, may you feel yourself cradled in the shape of something larger, a world held, named and lit gently from within. Sweet dreams, little storm walker. Tomorrow waits, but for now, let the waters hold you. End of script. Sweet dreams.